learn from the best. We are talking about articulation. Who has the best jazz articulation in the business? Timing is one of the most essential things in music. Directly linked to your timing is your articulation. Articulation is basically how you pronounce the words in the sentences you are playing. In this video I'll go over how you can get the best jazz articulation the fastest way. Always look at the best players, and there's a long list. Borrow, copy and steal if you must to get that sound and to get how it's done. The problem with jazz articulation is you have to use your tongue. We use our tongue a lot every day. We use it when we speak blah 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 blah. We use it when we eat. We have taste buds on our tongue.
Delicious, seasoned beautifully.
These are really the big essentials in everyday life. How we use the tongue normally, in normal circumstances in everyday life, is a bit of differ somewhat from how we're using it when we articulate on the saxophone. When we use our tongue in the earlier mentioned daily actions, we use it basically unconsciously. We are not aware of all the movements our tongue does when we speak, when we eat, when we taste stuff. When we articulate on the saxophone, we need to move our tongue very, very consciously. Very controlled action. We need to move our tongue fully synced with our fingers, fully synced with our ears. I want to start up with the build-up. The how-tos in the beginning of the learning to articulate. Then I advance into how to apply this to scales. And at the end of the video I'll go into how you can actually put this into solo context. Start out simple. Starting out with something we know is much easier than starting from rock bottom, starting from zero. There's one action we use, maybe not daily, but we are very conscious, also unconsciously using in our daily actions, that comes very close to articulating on the saxophone. If you have gotten a little piece of hair, a little bug or grass or something in your mouth, you do this spitting movement. It's like there's something on the tip of your tongue. Stick out your tongue. Put air pressure into your mouth. But don't release the tongue. Keep the air pressure going. Do not let any air out yet. You'll feel that you're pushing, but there's nothing happening. You push air into your mouth. The only thing that's stopping there is the tongue. The next thing is moving your tongue back to let the air out. It's like a cork in a bottle. Pull out the cork, you push in the cork and the water comes out. That's the articulation on saxophone. Put your tongue on the reed, you move it away, air comes through, you put your tongue on the reed, air closes. This is a very conscious movement of our tongue. This is also how mostly all saxophone articulation is done. Practice this is very, very simple. Do this in two ways. Short bursts. And longer breath. The most important thing is you keep pushing air. Keep practicing this just like this. You can do it in the car, in the sofa, everywhere you walk. Keep practicing this till you really got this under control. For reals, jazz articulation. Let's go straight to jazz articulation now that you have the basics down of how you do articulation. You can argue that all articulation is jazz articulation. And you're right, in jazz music, all types of articulations takes place. I'll go with the two most common types of jazz articulation, which we think of when I say jazz articulation. You will think of these two types. Start by articulating one full bar of eighth notes, all notes. We start with only playing a G. One note. It's much easier for the fingers. You don't have to think about the note, it's just one note. No synchronizing there. It's very important to get this very, very flexible because you need later on to synchronize with your fingers. And when you listen to it, you hear I slur all the notes. It's not like I'm having a little rest or something. So it's basically one long breath. Really many players add articulation to all the notes they are playing in jazz. This gets a much more refined sound, much more direct sound, accent to all the notes. And as of before, add the slurs to it. So it's basically a thing I do, but remember to slur everything, no rests in between. Basic movement is basically like the first exercise, spitting out. That's the whole thing about articulation, it's one movement. Swing articulation, the second type of articulation. This is the jazz articulation most referred to as jazz articulation. This is basically adding the accent to the second of two 8 notes. To the second of two 8 notes. This is me adding the accent on the second of two 8 notes in a bar of G 8 notes. Remember to slur it all, no rests. In the beginning of the line you see that I accent the first 2 notes. That's to get a start. I don't want to blow air through the horn, so fa. No, I want to get exactly the start I want at exactly that point. So I start by accenting the first note and the second note, and then I go from every second note. I move my tongue exactly as before on and off the reed, but I skip every second note. And again, when doing this, keep blowing air through the horn as if this was one long note. The only thing stopping it is your tongue. No breathing, no, just go with the airflow and the tongue does the rest. Add articulation to your scale practice. Adding the articulation into your jazz practice of your scales is all about coordination. Pick a scale you can play really easy. Here's the G major scale. Play it up, adding the jazz articulation on every second 8 note. This a couple of times, or maybe 10 times, or 100 times. That depends on how comfortable you are with the G major scale. So learn the G major scale, add articulation very slowly. Turn the scale around and play downwards. Add the same articulation, of course. I want to make a whole turn here, so I want to add the scale up and the scale down. For many, the challenge is turning it around. When you come to the top of the scale, you need to keep on going with the same accents, not from the first note, but going actually on every second note. And remember to keep the articulation slurred. This is the 2 basic articulations of jazz. Accents on all 8 notes and the accents on the second 8 note of 2. It's important you get comfortable playing this in not only the easier scale, but go with more scales. Remember also to change the tempo when you do this. Here is the G major scale, the A major scale and the B major scale. I just put this in a mix. Slowly adding tempo. Of course, don't rush this. If you have to play it 10 times, one tempo, do this 100 times, it's all okay. You have time enough to play. You need to get this really deep into your system, so this is second nature when you play. You need to just be able to add this like it's the easiest thing in the world. Only take the next step when you're secure of what you're playing. Adding articulation to your solos. This is a simple blues in G. The first thing I would do is just take it basically running up the scales. I'm using the scales because they're easy to articulate more than the arpeggios. You need to think more of your fingers when you do the arpeggios than the scales. This could be a great warm-up to your practice, for example. Run up the scales with articulation in a blues. Next step would be starting to play simple solos in a basic tempo. Remember that the focus should be jazz articulation. I will start by picking small parts of each bar. Each scale, just play 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. Not more. just going one direction, up or down. Don't play long runs to make it very complicated, just play it simple. When you're working with articulation or whatever other topic, start slow and work up the tempo, like this. I'm starting in a new tempo now, adding this. If you go fast too soon, you will mess up your articulation. The articulation will not be synced with your fingers. When going deeper into this matter of articulation, I have 2 recommendations for you. My earlier video on 4 different types of articulation, it goes into the depth of how to really do this. And my video on the most effective way to practice your scales, getting them into the music right away. Both videos should be up there. How do you go about practicing your articulation right now? What are your top 3 saxophone players when talking about articulation? Who are the most articulate player? Let me know in the comments below. Do you have questions about this topic? Fire away. You know where to find the comment section. Fire away questions. I love your support, likes, subscribes, shares. Always welcome. Find all the links in the description below. Play music and have fun.